From the deepest, darkest depths of academia, this is Cobb's List Radio with Rob Ferguson and Marie Totten, brought to you by H. Poll. We were just, I pressed record here a little. I was a little fast on the trigger finger on pressing record, and Marie and I were discussing the remarkable aspects of how busy you can be in the summertime. And, I know we're academics. I know we, you know, there are lulls in our schedule, but we were both commiserating about how busy we seem to be here in the height of summer.
Yes.
Marie, you were
all good stuff.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, Marie, you were mentioning that you were being used as an errand, as a sort of errand girl in the summertime because you don't need to be in the office 9 to 5.
Yes, and happy to do it for any of my family members that love to listen to a very intellectual podcast. Love to do it. Do not mind. But yes, I am the go-to in the summertime. Doctor's appointments, swimming appointments.
I have ballet shoes I have to buy today.
There
so
you
that's
go.
my thing. I have to buy them by 5 o'clock. And, I am not the person that I would trust in the world to buy ballet shoes.
That will be fun.
Not because I don't know how to do it, but it's I have no idea what I'm looking
for. Right. Hopefully you have detailed instructions.
Zero instructions. Zero instructions. She's going to end up with two Big Mac boxes on her feet.
I'm sure she'll be very pleased with that.
She might find it. She's 5. She might find it funny.
Yeah. Well, Godspeed with that.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to get a lecture from her anyway. She's a 5-year-old girl, and she loves to give lectures. So.
Very true.
Anyway, so this is the third episode in our summer in our summer 250 series, and this was, I will admit, my suggestion, and I made this suggestion entirely selfishly because I'd always wanted an excuse to read this, and so this gave me the excuse to read it. This is Douglass Adair's dissertation, The Intellectual Origins of Jeffersonian Democracy. This has a very interesting history, this dissertation. This is probably one of the few dissertations we'll ever do. Most of the time we'll do a book. But this was never turned. There's some history. This was never really turned into a.
Right. Not until 2000 it's published, but not while Adair's still here.
Right, and there's a lot of controversy over that publication. There's a reason that specifically we're doing this as the dissertation and not that 2000 book. The reason being that there were people in his estate and close friends of Dr. Adair who were not happy about that publication. And so we're doing the dissertation, and I encourage you to, if you're interested in reading it, to find the dissertation. I know the book was made in good faith, and there's no problem with that. If that's all you can get your hands on, it's better than nothing. But I do know, just from some people who knew Douglass Adair, that there was some controversy about that book, and so we're focusing on the original dissertation here. Marie, had you read this dissertation or any works of Douglass Adair before this?
I had not. I am glad that you suggested it here. I did look at the 2000 publication, and so I really at the foreword and the epilogue, which were of course added there. So I did look through that. The dissertation, though, is beautifully written. I mean, it stands on its own. It's a shame it was never made into a publication while Adair was alive. But hadn't read it, found it very interesting. Definitely see it in the work of Balin and Wood. Just knowing, I was like, okay, this is where these ideas come from. Got it. makes sense. Here's the foundation of the Republican synthesis. It was kind of underground for so long. And so I thought that was really interesting. The fact that a dissertation could have this much influence on the field in its, original form it was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah, this is after reading it, I'm like, this is the Urtext.
Yes. Yes.
Of the school of the Wood Balin, and even you can see Robbins is influenced by it too.
Yes,
she's influenced
absolutely.
too, and
absolutely.
Balin builds on this, right? This is so I and you're right, it is beautifully written. I'm going to be honest, my dissertation was not this beautifully written.
No. But he did have a bachelor's in literature and writing, English focus, so that certainly helped. I did not have that history all the way through, so did not have that training. So no, not as beautifully written.
I'm a monkey.
It read as an edited. I mean, it could have gone. I mean, there were a few things, factual things that needed ironed out, but for the most part, it read as a polished, finished work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does, and it reads easily. It is a beautifully written dissertation. The footnotes are unbelievable. The expository footnotes are incredible. They're a dissertation on their own.
Yes.
And yes. I'll be honest, I learned a considerable amount.
I did too. And I think this will set us up very well for our next episode, which will, of course, be with the entire H. Poll editorial team on the Federalist Papers.
Right. I think we're going to be better prepared than anybody after that.
Absolutely.
So it's probably, Marie, how much do you know about Douglass Adair?
Well, I did some background here on Adair and his life and kind of his career. I was very curious as I was going into this background on his career, especially as to why this never got published. Like, did his career take a different turn? And it did, but just some background here. So he's born in New York City, but he lives in the South throughout most of his life. So Mobile and Birmingham, Alabama. Born in 1912. He gets his bachelor's in English literature from the University of the South, which I hadn't heard of, but I found is this very prestigious liberal arts Episcopalian school in Tennessee.
Yep,
so very impressive there. Yes, Sewanee. He gets his master's at Harvard, his PhD at Yale, and it's at Yale in 1943 that he writes this dissertation. Not publishes, but writes this dissertation. He is going to work at a few different schools. He's an instructor at Yale. He teaches at Harvard for a bit. Eventually, he's going to end up at the College of William and Mary. And this is where his career takes this turn that I was very interested in. So when he works at the College of William and Mary, he begins to work on their journal. And now the journal is known as like the early American journal. Like, this is where you want to publish. It's the prestigious journal. So of course I'd heard about that. I did not know that it's Adair that makes it the core journal of early America. And so that's his focus for throughout mid 40s into the late 40s, early 50s there, is working on building up this journal. And that's where he's going to publish, is he's going to have editorial control over the journal. And we're going to see his ideas come out in the articles that he publishes, the articles that he puts into the journal, and then his own writing. And his writing during this time is going to center on the Federalist Papers themselves. And he's got this, I thought this was really interesting. He's got this idea that Madison wrote more of the Federalist Papers than he's credited with. So he's looking at these men, he's studying the way that they write, he's studying the words that they use, their like philosophical influences here. And he says, okay, there's 10 to 12 the authorship is disputed on these Federalist Papers. Hamilton takes credit for them. Madison takes credit for them later. So Adair kind of getting in the heads of these men, these founders, which I think comes across in the dissertation beautifully. I mean, you feel like you're with these early Americans, these founders, as they're making these decisions and writing these arguments down. But he decides, okay, these disputed articles or these disputed Federalist Papers were written by Madison. I can see the language here clearly. It's all lining up to be written by Madison. So he makes that claim. Later, you have some quantitative data from the use of a computer program that puts in the work of Madison and Hamilton, looks at those disputed papers and determines, yeah, based on language, based on the wording, based on the philosophy, Madison wrote these. So this claim that Madison wrote more of the Federalist Papers than he was credited with, not only does Adair prove it, but it's later proved by other technology. And I thought, how he really does push for Madison. I mean, you can tell in this dissertation, he just really enjoys being inside Madison's head, which is a big place to be. Madison is this intellectual, this philosopher. I totally buy into that. I mean, Madison wrote everything down. We use Madison. We have those sources. Very important founder. But I didn't realize, or I'd never been in the work of someone who appreciated Madison so much. And so it really was a neat experience to kind of get into this early American philosopher's head. And especially coming from someone who just appreciated him, who just appreciated that intellect. And really, I mean, it's Jeffersonian America, of course, is the title of the work, but it's Madison that embodies that ideology. And the two in the dissertation are one and the same.
Yeah, I love how you put that. I mean, there's a reason. If, as a historian today of early America, you appreciate James Madison, it's because of Douglass Adair.
I would think so.
Right?
Yeah.
When Douglass Adair is writing, James Madison is the forgotten of the key founder. He's not totally forgotten, of course, but he's not remembered. Adair is researching, at least. Not so much when he's writing, but when he's kind of coming in his formative years when he's researching. Alexander Hamilton is the founder extraordinaire. If you look from the 1890s all the way through the 1920s, Alexander Hamilton is, especially in the North, is the dominant founding father. He is the one who's given credit for everything. Okay? We have plays now about Alexander Hamilton, but there were novelizations of his life in like the early 1900s, and these strange biographies. I think songs written to him. So if you're looking at, like, Charles Beard is an Alexander Hamilton partisan.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't fully come to the same conclusions that Hamilton does, but Beard is giving Hamilton credit. And that whole era, the progressive era, is in a lot of ways a reflection of Hamilton. And Hamilton sort of becomes the founder of the era. Jefferson is sort of the opposition figure. And you see that in, like, Claude Bowers's work in the 1920s. And Jefferson is still the Democratic Party is still really associates themselves with Thomas Jefferson. And they view the Republican plutocracy as the party of Hamilton. And so they're just redoing it through Thomas Jefferson, right? This early American battle. But Adair's coming to the table with Madison.
Exactly.
And so he's not forgotten, but he's not prominent. Adair makes him the Madison we know today. And he is absolutely a Madison partisan.
Absolutely. Yes. It is there.
Marie, how does Douglass Adair like Alexander Hamilton?
I would say no. I mean, he does write about him, and it's all eloquent. He uses his words throughout, but you have to do that when talking about Madison because that is the opposition. But Douglass Adair, based on my reading, thought that Hamilton was a monarchist. And the idea of this class conflict, which of course Adair is pushing back directly against Beard in this dissertation. And he makes that very clear. that he's pushing. He thinks there's a hole here. He's pushing back against this economic determinism. And he sees Madison doing the same thing against Hamilton. Hamilton is saying it's a class conflict. It's always going to be rich versus poor. We've got to do something about that. And the way to do something about it is a permanent Senate and a permanent executive. Like you protect those business interests. And Madison is saying, no, that is how the republic dies. Like you cannot sustain a republic with that ideology. Just like Adair is saying, no, Beard, it's not just economic determinism. Now, he doesn't say that economic determinism isn't important. And I think that's an important part of the dissertation, is he's not claiming ideology is the only thing pushing the founders, but he's saying it is something that is worth exploring. Like this idea of, like, okay, there's some economic determinism here. Madison and Jefferson are farmers. They do have some kind of economic motivation, but they also believe in this philosophy. They believe in this ideology. And of course, Adair focuses on Hume and the Scottish Enlightenment more than we see, a focus on Locke, or that's what Adair claims that they're focusing on is Hume here. And so he's saying they really believe these things. They are philosophers of their age. They're reading these things. They're interpreting these things, just like we saw with Robbins and Balin taking these ideas. And of course, they're in conversation with Adair as they're developing their own ideas. And so they're taking these ideas and saying they're being used in the colonies. He's saying they're being used in the Constitutional Convention and then even after. And so you do have this kind of, he just lays out this back and forth. But to answer your original question, Hamilton is a monarchist. He is the opposition. Madison is the star of the show in this work.
Yeah, exactly. This is the reactionary Hamilton that comes through here.
Exactly.
The brilliant reactionary Hamilton.
Oh, yes. I don't think he at any point discredits Hamilton. He never says Hamilton isn't as brilliant as Beard argues here. He just says there's just way more to it. It's just not that simple. And he's not the hero that you make him out to be.
He also says that, like, what comes is that there's like one major, and this is so funny. I don't think I've ever, it's been so long, you see this in a history book or a dissertation or work like this, where Adair says Hamilton has one like significant intellectual blockage in his head that he can't get past, that Madison overcome.
Right.
Right? And that is that Hamilton keeps thinking that everything that was absolutely true in the classical era has to be absolutely true now. Whereas Madison doesn't.
Right.
And so, like, they're not immutable laws of nature to Madison, whereas they are to Hamilton.
Exactly. Madison can take that work and put it into his context. Hamilton cannot do that. Hamilton just looks at that, everything's the way it was in ancient Rome or ancient Greece. It's not going to translate, it's not going to adapt to the times that they're in. And Madison says, no, we can take these ideas and we can adapt them.
You know what, Maria, it was only by having this conversation with you that you were getting at this, and it really just, I fully reached a point here that this work is him attacking, we know it's him attacking Beard in the progressive school, but he's entirely attacking the notion of like a mechanical scientific history.
Right, yeah.
And he's using Madison and Hamilton to do it.
Right.
Like Hamilton is, not only is he's a reactionary in the book, but you could argue he's Karl Marx.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he is saying that, and Madison is some grand liberal critic of Marx, or he's Adair criticizing Marx, actually.
Right.
And he's using Hamilton, and it's Madison and Hamilton is how he's doing it, but really he's attacking the whole notion of the sort of timeless scientific history that the early progressive historians and social scientists all thought they were studying.
That's articulated very well.
Yeah. There's no timeless rules. Every generation's a little different. Every place is a little different. Doesn't mean you can't learn things.
Right.
And there aren't trends. But it's not a laboratory. This is why we have to have these discussions, Marie, because it's only by talking about this stuff back and forth that we...
Exactly. It all starts to come together. It all starts to come out in our miniature seminar discussions here.
Right. Now, Marie, we you worked at William and Mary for a while. Obviously, this is not it doesn't end. It ends very tragically, and we should probably talk a little bit about the tragedy.
Yes. So after William Mary, he does go to the Claremont Graduate School, and he's going to be there from, I think, 55 until his death in 68. He does die by suicide in May of 1968. And so he, obviously he's dealing with a lot. We can't know how he's feeling, but his death means that dissertation's never going to be published. Like, that's the end of his contribution to the Republican synthesis. That's not the end of the influence of the dissertation by any means. We're going to see this go forward. But the idea that would be published obviously it's not going to be published while he's alive. He's never going to see that monograph.
Yeah, he never produces a monograph.
Right. Some very influential articles, never a monograph.
Yeah. His you did mention that his uncovering of the Madison articles or Federalist Papers that had been attributed to Hamilton. I mean, that if you read nothing else by Douglass Adair, find that essay and read it. It's really interesting. It's like a detective novel almost.
Yes.
Is how it reads. I go out there and read it, and he basically just goes, he's like, this is why this never made sense to me. And, this is where, that a lot of people were just eager to give as much support to Hamilton as they possibly could. But anyway, it's a really great article if you can find it. I can't think of it, or it's like the disputed authorship of the Federalist Papers or something like that as a title. But you won't have any trouble finding it. It's a great article. And his Fame and the Founding Fathers essay is a really good one, too.
Yes, that's what I have down here. I thought I had the title of the Madison one as well, or the Disputed Papers one as well. But the Fame and the Founding Fathers is the kind of underappreciated, very, very influential article that he does write and publish.
And part of that argument is that, and it's more sophisticated than I'm going to give it here, is that, it's not just their wealth that they're looking out for, or even broad-minded liberal notions. The founders also recognize that they're living at this really important historical moment and are concerned and want to be famous.
Yes. They're looking to the future. Yes, they do. That's what he's arguing, at least. They absolutely are.
Anyway, anyway, Douglass Adair is tremendous. Lots of great work. Even though he didn't produce the monograph, lots of great work. But anyway, all right. So let's get back to this dissertation, which is what we're here to discuss. So Marie, how would you? We've talked about it a little bit so far, but what is his main argument against the Charles Beard School?
Yeah, so his focus is going to be on Federalist 10. So this idea that factions will ultimately end the republic, that if you have a faction that's majority, the minority will never have a chance to overcome that faction. And so the idea that Adair is looking at here is Madison's idea that if you have a large republic, a diverse republic, then the republic can stand. That you can have a democracy if it's large and diverse. So he's taking these ideas from philosophers. Adair says he really believes this. This is not just an economic argument here, because what Madison and Jefferson are ultimately going to argue is we need an agrarian society, that the only way this will work, and Adair takes this back to Aristotle. I mean, he's taking this ideology all the way back. And he says the only way that this can work is if you have an agrarian society, and ultimately, farmers are busy and they're focused on their immediate, and they're independent. And so if you have that society spread out over the country, you will have factions, but the factions will be small enough that you won't have a majority at any one time that will be tyrannical. And he's saying the way that Madison is interpreting this philosophy, because he can put it into its own context or his own context. He can look at it in 1787 and the events happening in 1787. And they are seeing, they've got Shays' Rebellion, they've got these other popular uprisings. You have, in some states, propertyless men can vote. In New Jersey, for a while, women can vote. So you do see, or they believe they're seeing this tyranny of the majority here, and they need to do something about it. And the Constitution kind of becomes that answer. But what Adair is looking at is he's tracing this idea of how to create this diverse agrarian republic and what that ideology is based on. And so again, Beard's arguing this is just pure economics. Jefferson and Madison they are farmers themselves, they are landowners, they are Virginians. They support this because that benefits them economically. Adair is saying no, they believe this ideology, they want the republic to last, and they really believe that this is how the republic is going to last. So just an overview there, a fairly general overview of kind of how he's looking at this.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a really, because this is really complicated. This book, like,
yeah,
it's not,
if you get in, yes,
it's really complicated, and I find it very persuasive, but it's very complicated.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's not arguing. He's granting that a lot of people at the Constitutional Convention are there purely to thinking in terms of class conflict, particularly Alexander Hamilton.
Right.
And Adair is arguing that, at the time, in Balin's book, later on, we see the influence of like the Anglo-Saxon experience and the Anglo-Saxon intellectual tradition. We also see, to go along with the the appreciation for the classical experience, particularly transmuted or that was transferred through Aristotle. But Adair's focusing on the classics.
Right.
So Balin's building on that and saying, no, it's not just the classics. There's this, there's the European history and Anglo-Saxon understandings of liberty to go with it as well. So Balin expands it through his use of pamphlets. But Adair he's before them. And he's arguing that Beard does not account for how important thinking about antiquity was to the founders, to all of the founders. And he says that from the perspective of the Alexander Hamilton crowd, the lesson that they take from Aristotle is that without a disinterested permanent executive, without what's called a mixed constitution that accounts for class, inside of the republic, the poor and the rich will consume themselves in civil war. And that's one of Aristotle's conclusions. So they think that they have the truth, capital T truth, as given to them through Aristotle's summary of the various Greek city-states, and through Thucydides. For anybody who's read Thucydides, the passage that is, if it's not, we remember the Melian dialogues, like that's sort of the one that IR classes teach. But if you're a historian, I mean, the passage that will be most memorable to you is almost certainly going to be the Civil War in Corcyra. It's visceral and it's scary.
Yeah. And he says Madison read that, and it scarred his mind.
It's
is
scarring
the terminology.
it's scarring all of their mind.
Yes.
Because and it scarred Thomas Hobbes's mind. I mean, Thomas Hobbes is one of the, he translates Thucydides into English, right? Hard not to imagine. I mean, he's witnessing the English Civil War and thinking about Corcyra. And it's not just Corcyra, but Corcyra is sort of the most acute, visceral moment in Thucydides, in the Peloponnesian War, where when the Athenians conquer it, they unleash the Democratic Party, basically, on the oligarchic party. And it's a massacre. Brutal. Like, massacre doesn't begin to explain how that passage. And so to Adair, he's saying, listen, at the Constitutional Convention, they're trying to, from the perspective of Alexander Hamilton and many others, their experience in the Confederation period has led them to believe, has reinforced that notion inherited from Aristotle and Thucydides, that if they don't create a strong, disinterested executive, Corcyra's in the future. That's a pretty remarkable conclusion for Adair to come to.
Right. Right.
And it really does help you put, when you think of it in those terms, all of a sudden the stakes of 1787 are unbelievably high.
Yes, especially when thinking that they saw that. Part of what makes this so complicated, to me, this dissertation so complicated or so complex, is how he gets into the minds of the founding fathers. You really do feel like you're in conversation with them. You forget that this is his interpretation of what they're saying. And so you really feel by the end, when he's talking about how this has scarred their minds. And I love that he uses that. And he's got a quote I'll find in a bit that he uses from Justice Holmes when talking about, good books scar the minds of their readers. But you can really see how, if that did scar their minds the way that we see that in Adair, the way he sees that in the writing, they're worried about this. This is real to them. They had experienced Shays' Rebellion. They had experienced these popular uprisings, or these governments who were arguing, these opposition leaders who were arguing for small confederacies versus one united country. And so that is real to them. That is real to them in a way that I don't think we can really appreciate today, when we're so numb to all of this imagery. But that is what they were thinking of, this passage that you described. They're thinking of this philosophy. That's just as real. And he talks about this. That is just as real to Madison as the written account of Shays' Rebellion.
Yeah.
He sees both in his mind.
Yeah. They're looking at Shays' Rebellion as like, this was a little Corcyra. This could have been Corcyra.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And to somebody like Alexander Hamilton in the book, it basically was Corcyra, right? And that process has begun. Whereas Madison's at least able to look at that and go, okay, according to Adair at least, Madison is like, listen, this is not good.
Right.
And I can see how we can get to Corcyra here, but we're not there yet.
Exactly.
And this is not the 5th century BC,
right,
in Greece. There are different things going on.
Exactly.
But it is. I mean, I actually am convinced that the Corcyra episode is that scarring on people's minds.
Yeah.
I mean,
Adair convinces me of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's a movie or something like that our generation saw, that there's like just a moment that we all remember that's scarred in our brain. I'm sure. I mean, I know my parents' generation, it was Old Yeller.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I'm sure if we
That's
needed to have a separate conversation for an
right,
hour to
to
discuss
come
this
up
ahead
with
of
this.
time,
Exactly.
but
Exactly. But I'm
but
sure we could find.
yeah, I'm sure we could find one that everybody, I'm 39, I'm an older millennial or whatever we're supposed to be called. I'm sure we can find a scene in a movie that we all remember and go,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Corsaira is that to this generation. Corsaira is the end of Old Yeller to the founders' generation. And so I can see how that casts a major shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to avoid that at all costs.
Right.
And
And
like you said,
Alexander
Hamilton believes it's happened.
and
And now we
Hamilton,
have to.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say and Hamilton knows that he's going to be victim number one.
Right? Yes. Yes. That's what he thinks for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Madison and Jefferson might sort of be able to go, okay, I could, actually, here's another perfect example for Southern historians, especially antebellum Southern historians: the revolution in Haiti and the slave uprising in Haiti. And then, that casts such a massive shadow over Southern slaveholders. And then Nat Turner's rebellion kind of reinforces it, right?
Right.
But when, one of the things that, is going through antebellum slaveholders' minds before the Civil War, before emancipation, is that if we give an inch, we are going to be treated and massacred as brutally as the slave owners were in Haiti.
Yeah. That's an excellent example.
And so they have that notion in their heads about Corsaira. And Montesquieu, according to Adair, that's what he's worried about when he comes up with the mixed constitution. Right? Is Montesquieu believes that in a republic you need the mixed constitution. And Montesquieu admires the British system, and so does Hamilton. So they look at the British system as commons, lords, and monarch, or chief magistrate, or whatever you want to call it, and says, okay, that's what you need. You need an estate, sort of an estate system with an aristocracy, commons, and monarch. And that's how you keep things in balance. And then how do you do that in a republic? Then Montesquieu has his own notions for that, which is one of them being it's got to be a small republic.
Right. And it won't survive if it's large.
And it won't survive if it's large. And this is like one of the things that Adair brings up about Hamilton that never occurred to me. That why does Madison all of a sudden think that a large republic is going to work compared to a small republic? You're not going to have that awful civil war in a large republic like you will in a small republic. And I'd always sort of thought of it in political theory and interest group politics terms, Federalist had.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Adair makes it very clear. He's like, in a small republic, you live right near each other, right? So, and it's very easy for the classes to become distinct in a small city-state sort of thing.
Yes.
And people are confronted with the class situation day in and day out. And I mean, heck, it's not hard to imagine that, because I mean, if you've read Marx, the proletariat is the revolutionary class, and they're an urban class.
Exactly. Exactly. It's this urban consolidation that
Right.
Madison is pushing, saying this will not work. Exactly what you think is going to happen, Hamilton, will happen if you continue to push people into these urban areas and focus on commerce. Because exactly what you just said, the proletariat, the workers, the poor are going to see how well the rich are doing. They're going to be right there. They're going to have access to them in a way that a large, diverse republic population would not.
And that intimacy will breed what's the word I'm looking for? Contempt.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is where you get those cycles, those polybian cycles, right? Because again, they're also, Polybius is another thinker that they've all kind of got in their minds, but that where the if the oligarchs have power, have total power, they just end up viewing everybody at the hoi polloi as their own, as little instruments to their own enrichment. But if the mob gets power, they're going to, they will unleash the burden of a million insults and the wrath that's so associated with that. And so, yeah, this is where Madison says the small republic is way more dangerous.
Right. And what's that going to lead to? Because if you have a small republic and they do rebel, I mean, there's really one of two options. Either you go the Marxian direction and you have, communist state or the beginnings of communist state, or you go the other direction and you have a monarch who is powerful. He can put down these rebellions. And that's the direction Jefferson and or Madison see it going. Is that if you have this state that Hamilton wants, you're going to have a monarchy. And it's going to be a strong monarchy to keep the lower classes in check. And so that's how they're looking at it long term. And I think he spells that out very well throughout the text.
Right. And the other thing that they point out, both, and I think it might even be Jefferson in the text that does this rather than Madison, but it was probably Madison. If I think about it, it's Adair. If it was a really original idea, Adair attributes it to Madison.
Yes.
But that, in his reading of history, the monarch is usually not the tool of the aristocrats. The monarch allies himself with the mob against the aristocrats. Right? Which is, by the way, what Machiavelli recommends doing, by the way.
Right.
You
Stay
don't
in power.
You don't just, because, and Machiavelli's point is that if you become that if you ally yourself with the aristocrats, the mob will just view you as a replaceable aristocrat. You're an aristocrat like anybody else, so who cares? We have no attachment to you. You could be anybody. But if you attach yourself to the people against the aristocrats, you are unique. And so Jefferson and Madison look back and go, okay, yeah, that's actually what history tells us.
Right.
And we don't want that either.
Right.
Hamilton, you think you want this, but I don't think you really understand what you're getting at, what's going to happen here.
No.
And yet Madison and Hamilton end up writing the Federalist Papers.
Right. Together.
It's a tremendous cooperative project.
Yes. And of course, Adair gives Madison credit for, compromising with Hamilton and saying, okay, I'm willing to do this for the greater good, but we still disagree on almost everything. But that's part of we need the Constitution. We've compromised in the Constitution. Hamilton did not get his way in the Constitution. They shut that down very quickly after he stands up and gives this speech basically supporting and wanting to push through a monarchy that Madison just rips apart. Yeah. But they do agree to work together for the overall good, because both agree at the end of the day that there needs to be a new government, that there has to be a stronger federal government to keep all of this together and to keep the experiment alive. And I think Adair makes it out that Madison is looking toward the future in a way that Hamilton is not. And Madison doesn't think that it's going to last forever. He doesn't think that this is the Constitution is a surefire way to make sure that the country stands for a long period of time. I think that Adair says Madison says 25, 30 years. He thinks, and then there will have to be a great overhaul, because, and think of the context in which Madison is writing, the country is much smaller. And so he's saying we can only spread out so far before we begin to once again consolidate in these urban settings, and this is going to be a problem all over again. And then he revises the length of time after the Louisiana Purchase, and of course after we get the rest of the continental United States, that of course would have changed Madison's mind as well, based on of what Adair's writing about here. So he knows that the document is not, it's probably not going to be permanent, and that they all knew that, because that's why they gave us the ability to amend it, because they knew it would need to be changed over time. And I think Adair does such a great job showing that Madison's looking toward the future. Hamilton's looking toward the immediate, like, let's get this financial system set up. Let's do all of these things now. We'll avoid this, or we'll stomp this out later. But Madison is looking to posterity.
Right. Right. And there's this notion that, he begins the dissertation by saying that, we've seen Jefferson and Madison in the 1890s going around the country warning about a monarch. In the 1790s, I might have said 1890s, 1790s, warning about a monarch. And Adair says, modern commentators have just sort of attributed this to political rhetoric, and it's like demagoguery. Right. It's like William Jennings Bryan, or Andrew Jackson. And Adair says no. No, they're very worried about this, and they view Alexander Hamilton as the instrument through which a monarch, and the Federalist Party as the mechanism through which a monarch will emerge.
Right. Right.
And and so much of the book is or the dissertation is about trying to defend that claim.
Right.
That.
Go ahead.
No,
sorry.
Please.
It's just going back to this idea that it's not just political rhetoric, it's not just demagoguery. They didn't view themselves as political parties. We don't have, the idea of legitimate opposition yet. We don't have the idea of political parties yet in the country when they're making these arguments. They don't see the need for this. They're obviously trying to be elected, but they're trying to be elected in a system where they believe that what they are saying is the only way forward, and that Hamilton's way will not work, and it is not legitimate in the same way long term as their ideas will be. So I think that I definitely bought into Adair's argument that they believe this. They believe this. It is not just political rhetoric, because that's not necessary at the time in the same way it will be later.
Yeah, I mean, I find it very persuasive. That they believed it. They believed that the Hamiltonian system was likely to either breed such a consolidation of power with somebody like Alexander Hamilton that a monarch would functionally exist, or an aristocracy, or a plutocracy would exist, and that might either consolidate into a monarchy, or that the people would rise up against it violently and impose their own. And that therefore the agrarian, sort of a middle way.
Yeah. The agrarian society.
Yeah. I realized reading this book that I maybe I didn't read Aristotle closely.
Yeah, I definitely had missed that. I'm glad that I had this refresher here, because that's not part of my reading either. Although I'm not a philosopher in any way, shape, or form, introduced to Aristotle at some point, but was surprised that this went all the way, over 2,000 years. This ideology was over 2,000 years old. That was surprising. Definitely missed that.
Yeah, Aristotle the agrarian is sort of
right.
he believes in an agrarian law, and Adair distinguishes between and you can tell the great liberal arts education that he had that I didn't have.
Yes.
The university, like Sewanee, prepared him for this.
Yes.
That but he distinguishes between Aristotle's lex agrarian law, the lex agraria of the Roman Empire, and of Julius Caesar, for instance. And he also, but what I was so interested about, and this had never occurred to me. Again, and I'm laying my ignorance here for the world. Okay, I I am a modern historian who who went to public universities, and so I've read Aristotle, but I've never really been given probably the proper instruction on him that I should have been. I've read a lot of. I got that with Marx and Adam Smith. I don't think I didn't get it with Aristotle.
Right.
There's a history of capitalism literature in American historiography, and one of the questions, and I be honest, I don't know that it's a particularly useful question. It has some value, but it's like, when does capitalism start? Which inevitably makes it a semantical question, and you start arguing, and it's a question I think that the Marxists like because it matters in their structure of history. But Adair here, although he's not saying that because he's not contending with the history of capitalism literature, but he's describing a Greek world that is essentially capitalist. And Aristotle is distinguishing, I think what I was familiar with in Aristotle is the economia notion, which is like, household management, and this is where we get the term economics from, that,
Right.
produce to consume, that kind of thing. But Adair, there's this whole other world in Aristotle that I was unaware of.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Right? Where he's talking about the logistics, investment, the networks, how money is changing hands across the entire economy, and Aristotle blames that for the class conflict. But it suggests a far more economically complicated Greek world than I had imagined.
Right. Yes, I agree with you. And anytime we have any kind of, we're here to share our ignorance in some cases, and this is a safe space for that. So I appreciate that, because I feel the same. I went to excellent universities, and I'm very proud of my education, but I did not get that. That was, like you said, that was very new to me. And I enjoyed learning about it, and it was surprising. But I agree with you. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, there are many times, especially when I'm reading intellectual histories, where I was like, I didn't get this liberal arts education.
No, not the same way. No, I did not either.
But actually,
it makes sense.
Sorry, go ahead.
It fixes that puzzle. I'm not an intellectual historian. And so, like you said, whenever I read intellectual history, it really does open my eyes and put those puzzle pieces together, because, like Adair says, it's a piece. It may not be the entire story, but it's worth looking into. It's worth digging into. And this are our experiences with intellectual histories throughout this podcast. Absolutely agree. It is worth looking into. It has changed the way that I look at my own work, for sure.
I agree. I haven't the vault. I don't know how many true intellectual histories we've read for this podcast so far. A handful, anyway. And it's not often that I get. But I've got a daughter. I'm constantly confronted with my own ignorance. But other
Yeah.
than that,
Teenagers. Same.
well, she's not a teenager yet, but she's 5. But well, you got teenagers, so yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
God. So we're constantly and reminded of our own ignorance.
Yes.
But reading these intellectual histories for this podcast has been of an enormous value to me.
Yes.
Among
me
other
too.
things, but has definitely been puzzle pieces you can fit in.
Right.
And I think it warns you away from overly deterministic conclusion.
Yes, I agree with that as well. And that's part of what comps is supposed to do in the first place. That's our target audience, right? These graduate students who are starting to piece all of these things together. And their comprehensive exams are supposed to show how they've pieced all of these ideas together. And so I think that we're working all of this out in real time in the way that they would work this out in a seminar if they were still reading these texts. And so I think we are achieving our goal with this.
I hope so. I think we are too.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so if you're interested in really where the notion of of Madison as the genius of the American Constitution, it's this dissertation.
Absolutely. And the foundation of the Republican synthesis. Even if he doesn't get all of the credit, because we don't really have that, I mean, we don't have the published monograph, which of course is going to limit his, larger standing in the field. That's going to limit the way that this book is kind of passed around. It's kind of passed around underground. So they're conversing with it and they're talking with it, but it's not got this popular audience the way we see with these other books. But this is the foundation. I mean, this is in the 1940s, and we're seeing this argument made that early. And so if you want to know about the foundation of the Republican synthesis, you've got Adair, you've got Robbins, you've got Phelan, you've got Wood. We've kind of created this through line now for you. And I think that is, I think that's important to look back at Adair. I'm so glad that you brought this book or this dissertation to our attention, because I do understand Phelan and Wood better. I do understand the Constitutional Convention in a way that I didn't before. And of course, we all love Madison now. We all know how important Madison is now, but knowing that wasn't always the case was interesting to find out, and to know where that came from was, again, one of those puzzle pieces that I put together with this work.
If you go back and you read that article for people that I recommended, his disputed authorship of the Federalist Papers article, where he really kind of makes the case that here are the papers that are Hamilton's and here are Madison's. Here's where the confusion came from, but here's why these are Madison's, and that Hamilton gets credit for like 15 or 20 that are not his. But it's really, when you read that, you get this understanding of how popular. I think today, especially when the Hamilton musical came out, there was this, in the Chernow biography, there was this idea that Hamilton is underappreciated, and therefore we're going to recover Alexander Hamilton for another generation, right? Adair is doing that for Madison.
Yes.
Because there was a time when Hamilton was considered the genius of the Constitution, not Madison.
Right.
The reason Chernow and the musical had to happen to bring back Hamilton is because of the assault that Adair launches against Alexander Hamilton.
Yes, it's a corrective.
Right.
It's this corrective that we see. Yes, salvaging Hamilton from what we see with Adair, because other intellectual historians, as the Republican synthesis becomes more popular, they're looking to Madison. They're looking to this ideology. And I'm glad you brought up the Hamilton musical, because in that, Madison is a side character. Jefferson, when you think of the two, Jefferson is the main character in that. And what we see is, no, Madison is the main character, whether he wanted to be or not. He is the main character in this story.
Yeah, and that's the notion of, like, Jefferson is a tremendous political animal and he's a tremendous political philosopher, but he was sort of like had flights of fancy and that kind of thing, right? Madison is the grounded one.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And
Jefferson's the idealist.
Mm-hmm. Jefferson is attached to Locke, right? Madison is attached to Hume.
Right.
And that comes through in this dissertation, is Hume.
Absolutely.
You mentioned it earlier,
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's Madison has moved past Locke, right? Hume is after Locke, so that makes sense. But Madison has moved past Locke, and Jefferson is still sort of stuck in a fully Lockean mindset.
Right. It almost seems as if Madison has accepted Locke. Okay, this is accepted. Now what do we do about it?
Right.
What is the answer? And he finds that answer in Hume.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the notion, and this is the notion that the large republic. And again, so much of this is focused on Federalist 10, and for people who are tired of hearing of Federalist 10 because they've been forced to read Federalist 10 in their classes and whatnot, like, stop talking about Federalist 10. I get it, but the reason you got that is because of this dissertation.
Yes. It is
because
important.
Federalists, it's because of this dissertation. Not only, but like he really gives it he really brings it to bear. And the Adair says that it's not out of whole cloth. Madison doesn't fully invent it. He's taking traces of Hume, traces from other places, but really Hume. But he puts it together ingeniously. And part of his experience that he uses here is his experience as a Presbyterian in Virginia, whereas he looked at places and he said, okay, when there's only two religions, they go to war with each other. When there's several religions, they don't. And it's like, oh, but what if we do that with economic faction?
Right.
And then, yeah, I didn't know this about Hume. Maybe you did. I certainly didn't. But that Hume has this whole system of idealized representative government that Madison cribs off of. He massively changes it, but like a couple of basic concepts are retained.
Right.
And if you want to know where the representative kind of ethos of the Constitution comes from, intellectually, it's Hume. And I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, he put it together for me. So Locke and Hume, we learn about those, we study those, we've got the basics down with those, with that ideology. But he definitely put that together with the Constitutional Convention. So that was more, he draws that out very clearly.
Anyway, I enjoyed it. Thanks for indulging me.
It was wonderful. I'm glad that you suggested it. It was a great dissertation. It was so interesting knowing that this was an unpublished dissertation that had such a just seismic influence on the field. And it took time, but it really did have this massive influence on the field in a way that I don't think you can fully appreciate until you read it. And I agree, read the dissertation. I did read, I said I read some of the published work, and I read Joyce Appleby's. She was one of his students, her foreword. And I liked most of it. I liked how she talked about him as being so cerebral. And you see that in the work. You read the dissertation first, and then you look at how people are talking about him in this work. And she just talks about how he wants to be in those moments he's studying. He really wants to understand the context in which he's studying. And I think that's so important because we've talked about these historians who are writing history, but looking at the context in which they're writing, like especially in the 1960s. And they're asking these historical questions, and their answers are influenced by what they're seeing around them. And I don't see that with this dissertation in the same way that I saw it with the other readings that we've done. He really is trying to get into their minds. He really is taking himself back to the 1780s. And even, talking about Aristotle, he is bringing this history out in a way I really don't think that we've seen in the same way before in the readings we've done. And so I thought that was really special. And she does point that out in the foreword that she wrote. But just knowing that he was as cerebral as he seemed was just, I'm glad to know that. I'm glad to know because it came across.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's unlike. I can't think of another example as strong as this. Not only among our readings, but any reading.
Yeah.
Where he seems to be able to. He makes a plausible. You can plausibly imagine that he is fully inside their head.
Yes. Yes, and it comes across like you feel it.
Yeah. And even in like footnotes of Governor Morris, or Pinckney
Right.
or
Yeah,
Pierce,
picnic. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
he seems to. They don't usually make it in the main text; they're usually in the footnotes. But
Yeah. Which were
you,
very good, as you said earlier.
yeah,
Worth reading. You cannot read this without reading the footnotes.
no. But there are moments where you're just like, yeah, that's basically that's kind of what I would have imagined Governor Morris would have said, or how he would have
Right.
thought about that.
Right. Right. They're three-dimensional characters now.
Right. And yeah, and he says, and there's lots of qualifiers throughout and that kind of thing, but it's a lovely dissertation.
I agree. I agree.
Anyway, so we're gonna go on a short break, not a real break. We're quick turnaround is what I mean. We'll have the whole group here to talk about the Federalist Papers in honor of July 4th.
Yes, and that'll be a lot of fun. We're getting the group together.
We are the band's coming together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Marie, thank you very much, and we'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
All right. Bye.